After the calamitous debut of Diablo 3 way back in 2012, it's understandable if you're a little nervous about the upcoming launch of Diablo 4 this June. But after more than a decade of gradual improvement that has transformed Diablo 3 into the fantastic game it is today, the first beta weekend of Diablo 4 has reassured me that Blizzard has been making good use of those hard-learned lessons to give its sequel a better start. Even though this beta only included Act 1 and 3 of the 5 classes capped at level 25, so far it has exceeded my expectations in almost every way. There's still a huge amount to see before we get anywhere close to a final review, but I'm already impressed by stellar dark storytelling, the best combat in a Diablo game to date, and a live service foundation that aims to chart out a strong future for this beloved action RPG series.
I just came here for knowledge.
They're coming!
I know.
Get over here!
Now. Breach the seal.
The first thing Diablo 4 immediately made clear to me is that Blizzard has really upped its game when it comes to story, or at least is off to an incredibly strong start. Following the dramatic resurrection of the Lord of Hatred Lilith, you begin a gruesome and dire journey across the land of Sanctuary, as humanity descends into madness at her behest. While I've always enjoyed the dark stories of the Diablo series, the chunk of story that we get in the beta has me more invested than any of the previous games did at this point. Lilith and her relationship with humanity, the heavens, and her archangel consort are a complex and messy web of painful truths and moral ambiguities. They're so interesting, I insisted on stopping to read every piece of lore I could find.
We're going to make Lilith pay for what she's done.
It's a vast improvement over the tedious WWE-style smack talk we heard from the demons of Diablo 3.
I will not be undone! This world is mine!
The same can be said of the world and quests. Moving around the overworld was far more engaging than I expected, with lots to discover along the way and spontaneous activities to involve yourself in. In a few, there's this ritual where you have to give your blood to a demonic obelisk by standing in a certain location while fighting off waves of enemies. I can imagine that getting harrowing once we're able to turn the difficulty up a few more notches than the beta allowed. Dungeons are a blast to explore too. They're highly rewarding expeditions into cellars crawling with skeletons, prisons haunted by spirits, and caves full of slimy bugs. They all conclude with interesting boss fights that, more often than not, require you to jump through more hoops than simply burning down a demon's health bar. For example, in this fight I had to kill a crafty set of demons who flapped their bat-like wings away from me as they magically protected a blood mage, and I couldn't harm her without killing the demons first. Even if some areas and bosses are reused quite often, even in the sample I played, adventuring is still a highly repeatable affair, and I found it extremely difficult to avoid dropping whatever I was trying to focus on anytime a map marker popped up with some distraction to take on.
Lost souls! All of you!
When it comes to gameplay, and specifically combat, so far Diablo 4 is absolutely nailing the action RPG formula. Naturally, it keeps the long-standing slashing and fireball slinging mayhem, but makes important tweaks that make it a whole lot more engaging than dipping back into Diablo 3 for yet another playthrough. Rather than just rotating through each of my character's abilities as they completed their cooldowns or standing in place spamming the standard attack button, beating the agents of hell now requires me to dance around hordes of enemies, dodge rolling precisely, and making use of my most powerful abilities at the proper moment. This fire shield, for instance, protects my sorcerer and ignites anyone foolish enough to get near me. I'm especially fond of the decision to largely do away with continuous healing in favor of consumable potions that are dropped onto the battlefield regularly, which requires you to navigate the map for resources as you wage battle to collect healing items as needed. Not only does this force you to be more mobile during combat instead of standing there and healing faster than they can hurt you, but it also adds a bit of challenge. If you aren't doing enough damage to a boss to kill it before you use up all your potions, or at least killing off enough minions to replenish them quickly, you're going to die. The potions you collect are preferable to the health orbs found in Diablo 3 and Diablo Immortal, since they aren't consumed right away and can be strategically used when you need them.
Beyond this lake lies the necropolis of the Firstborn, a trove of magic and knowledge.
As with all action RPGs, The real, lasting fun comes from learning and then mastering the dense wall of numbers and perks that is the skill and loot system. Diablo 4 remains the same incredibly complex array of statistics, buffs, debuffs, status effects, and abilities that this series has always been. And though it's hard to judge a lot of how it's changed things up with only 25 skill points and a limited look at the available loot, so far my impressions are mostly positive. It's dodged the boring loot system that Diablo 3 launched with, by making choosing the right item for your character a lot more nuanced than automatically equipping the item with the biggest number. Most items that aren't junk provide different game-changing effects and stat boosts that might or might not play into your specific build, like a pair of boots that gives your rogue an additional dodge roll, or a wand that allows you to do more damage to enemies that are immobilized, stunned, or frozen.
They have awakened, Mother.
The first beta weekend only gave us access to 3 of the 5 character classes that will be available at Diablo 4's launch, but so far, all 3 are pretty great. The Rogue, which was my favorite class from the original Diablo, makes a glorious return as a glass cannon who is an expert at cutting through enemy defenses and dealing critical damage. Plus, she can go invisible to take heat off of her, then reappear to deal, that's right, a ton of damage. The Sorcerer has a similar set of mostly long-ranged skills based on fire, electric, and ice attacks, but I found them to be better at controlling large groups of enemies, like with a chain lightning attack that zaps 6 enemies with every blast, rather than doing high damage to a single opponent. Plus, dealing elemental damage and freezing enemies in their tracks or lighting them on fire is great. They even have different death effects. The Barbarian, on the other hand, felt a little weak in the beta, and I hope Blizzard takes the note that melee combat in general could use a buff. The second or so it takes to get close to an enemy is often not worth the trouble when a rogue could have easily killed them from a distance by the time you get there. Still, being able to withstand a ton of damage and run around as a shirtless, hulking berserker is still a lot of fun, especially since the character creator mandates that all berserkers have the body type of Dave Bautista. Speaking of which, one of my disappointments is that the character creator in Diablo 4 feels quite limited, at least the version available in the beta. Aside from picking a handful of faces, hairstyles, and tattoos, there isn't a whole lot for you to customize. Granted, a lot of that stuff will be covered up by the gear you'll gather and equip, but it's surprising that there aren't any sliders to change the size or shape of specific parts of the face or different body types to pick from, considering you see a lot more of yourself now that cutscenes zoom in to focus on you. I was also disappointed that I couldn't pick a voice for my Demon Slayer, which instead is determined solely by your sex and character class. I didn't really feel like I had a lot of options to make my character my own, which will hopefully not be the case in the full version.
She said the lords of hell are coming.
But Lilith serves neither side. She has her own plans for us.
The biggest change from Diablo's classic action RPG model is Blizzard's decision to integrate live service and MMO elements, and at least so far, that decision seems like it'll carry the pros and cons you might expect. That foundational shift includes the same irritating always online requirement Diablo 3 has on PC, and that means occasionally getting booted to the menu when servers aren't working. I definitely wasn't happy when I got disconnected from the server near the end of a lengthy dungeon run and lost half an hour of progress. On the other hand, seeing other people out in the world and organically completing a public event together, like taking down this crazy zombie dragon world boss, made Sanctuary feel a lot less lonely. For my money, as someone who's neck deep in Destiny 2 and appreciates those ongoing efforts, those benefits far outweigh any drawbacks, and the potential in a fully live service Diablo came across crystal clear in the small bite I got from the beta.
Do you feel it changing you? Perhaps not yet.
That's all for now, but check back after this coming weekend's second beta for my thoughts on whatever trouble I get into with the 2 new classes. In the meantime, check out some gameplay and an interview with Diablo 4's director. And for everything else, stick with IGN.